Greetings and welcome back to 303 in Junior English. We now turn in your hymnals to page 877. And we are continuing our conversations about Robert Frost. And here we'll be looking at what many think is maybe his most famous poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Let's point out right away at 2b. We need to reiterate this, and we said this obviously when we did the study of Emily Dickinson's poetry. We never want to assume things about a poem's length. Well, notice, for example, that this is a poem, do you see it, of how many stanzas and how many lines in each stanza, right? Do you see it? Okay. So we're talking about a 16-line offering, and it's possible that some of us would say, wow, I mean, what can be accomplished in 16 lines? And the answer for Frost is a whole lot. We also should point out right away at level 2b, even before we get into the poem, and I'm trying to teach you how to read. And one of the things I'm pointing out to you is you always want to pay attention to the structure of whatever it is you're reading, whether it be poetry or prose. Notice, for example, here right away, we can begin to identify the rhythms here. Notice, just read it with me. Whose woods these are, I think, I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. You see it? Also notice in rhyme. No, though, snow, right, with the word here. Do you see it? Then notice queer, near, year, which rhymes with here. Do you see it? Right? Okay. So we're speaking obviously here in this, again, this blank verse, this unrhymed iambic pentameter and all of that, right? Okay? Let's go ahead now and just read the poem and spend some time critiquing what's going on here, right? Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkness evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there's some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. Now, let's just pause for a moment. You go ahead and do your own work really quickly. What for you is going on in this poem? Just jot down at level 1. What is this poem about? I mean, the title says it's about a guy that stops in the woods on a snowy evening. But ask yourself, what really do you think is going on in this poem? Some have pointed out right away that this is a poem where quite literally the speaker of the poem has to make a choice. Okay? And as we'll talk at level 3a here in a little bit, one of Frost's most famous poems is that one about I took the road less traveled and it has made all the difference. Two roads diverged in a path, I had to make a choice. And so these two poems are often companion reads. There has to be a choice that's being made. But what is that choice in this poem? He stops. He looks in at the woods. He says that they are lovely, dark, and deep. But he says, I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. We're going to ask this question here in a bit at 2b. Why do you think he has to say it twice at the end of the poem? And miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. Of course, there actually are 3 characters in this poem. There's the speaker of the poem. There's the owner of the property that owns the woods, but that owner is in the village. He's not here. And there's, of course, the pony, who's trying to figure out, dude, why are we stopped? It's cold, and we're a long ways from a farmhouse, so why are we stopping here? Which begs a really interesting question, so let's ask it in your notes. Why does he stop? Let's go back and read the poem again and see if we can figure out why he stops. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. So quite literally, the answer from the first stanza is, the reason he stops is, he wants to watch the woods fill up with snow. What? What's that about? Can you jot down what you think is going on here? Many have argued that he maybe needs a little bit of solitude, a little bit of quiet. At 3B later, we'll maybe ask, do you ever get to this point where you just wish that you could have calm, peace, noise all go away, right? Notice all the sounds of the open sounds. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. These elongated open sounds give the sense of what kind of mood. Jot that down at 2B. What kind of mood? It's kind of soft, kind of tranquil, kind of quiet. The second stanza interjects now, as we said, the other character in the poem with him. My little horse must think it queer, odd. Here queer means odd, right? To stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake. And then we're told, this is the darkest evening of the year. So we are in the evening, next to some woods. The snow is coming down. It's very tranquil, very quiet, very peaceful. Solitude. Back to the pony in the third stanza. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. In other words, the pony's like, what are we doing? The only other sounds, the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. Again, the sounds here giving that sense. And again, students who grow up out here in Wyoming can appreciate a scene like this. It's very, very possible that a good number of you have experienced this very thing. I once had a student that said, this reminds me of when I was young, we went up to the mountain to cut down our Christmas tree. And you drive in the truck, and then you park, and then you get out and you start walking through the snow. And when everyone stops talking, it's just this weird silence that is only going to be interrupted by maybe the wind blowing through the trees. And it's just like this landscape that goes on and on forever with all this snow. And it's a very peaceful feeling, but it also can be a very overwhelming feeling. It's like, oh, there's a lot of mountain out here and lots of trees out here. And it's a world that's completely foreign until you're there, right? And then you're like, oh, this is kind of really, really nice. The final stanza will end with a double repetitive line. We'll have to ask why. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. Notice your trinities here, right? The three. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. They're not necessarily menacing. Dark here maybe means uncertain. But I have promises to keep. Miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Let's go ahead and answer the question at level 1. What choice does he make? Does he choose to stay and walk through the woods or watch the woods fill up with snow? No, he does not, right? Why does he decide to get back on his pony and keep going? He says it. I have promises to keep. And I got a long ways to go before I sleep. End of poem. Now this is a classic example of how Robert Frost will get you. Because it's really just that simple. Guy stops, looks in at the woods, pony goes, dude, what are we doing? Guy says, oh yeah, you're right. I don't have time to do this, I gotta go. Get on the pony and leave. That's the poem. That's the 16 lines. But as one of my juniors once asked, if that's all that's going on in this poem, then why is this poem considered such an important poem? And the answer, of course, is there are two ways to read a text. Literally and metaphorically. Oh, literally, this is just a dumb poem about a guy that stops and looks in at the woods and his pony says, let's go, and he goes. But metaphorically, figuratively, this poem begins to be read by lots and lots of people as a powerful statement of what it means to pause in your life and ask two questions. Where have I been? And where am I going? That is to say, the past and the future. In the moment of the present, there you are. Stop for a moment, silent. Solitude. The snow falling in the woods. That notice are lovely, dark, and deep. What do you think, now we're working obviously at 2A and possible themes messages, what do you think the woods could symbolize or represent for you? Jot down what you think they could. Finally, what do you think the word sleep, repeated twice at the end of the poem, could symbolize? Well, of course, the easy answer here is, right, death. That's right, death, right? The woods can be the unknown. Sleep can be one's passing out of this world, one's death. We have already said before in lectures to you that the only difference between you and a fly is that you know about fly swatters. Right? When you wake up in the morning, you're aware. It's like they taught you, again, what we said. It's what they taught you when you were a child at the park. You wanted to stay and swing, and they said, no, you got to go to the van. You're like, I don't want to go to the van. Yeah, you don't have a choice. This is the way it works. Right? This poem, then, is going to challenge us to think about the pause. The moment we stop and reflect for just a little bit. And as we reflect, there are two places we have a tendency to look backwards. The things we've done. The long road we've already ridden, right? Just back to our poem. And then, of course, the future. It's fascinating to be a junior in high school, isn't it? Because you've made it through 2 years of high school. Did that wretched sophomore experience. And now I'm in my junior experience where I'm aware at the end of my junior year, I will be a senior in high school. And of course, people in your junior year start asking you the question of all questions. Okay, 24 months away. That's all you got in school left. What are you going to do? Will you stop asking me that question? It's the question all juniors say they loathe the most. Would you quit asking? How am I supposed to know? Of course, the funny thing is, the last time I counted, the junior year is year 11. That means 11 years of school. Which begs an obvious question. You've been in school 11 years. How is it possible you do not know what you're going to do after you graduate? 11 years you've been getting ready for it. But most juniors will respond, many juniors will respond, I just don't know. I don't know. The uncertainty. It's not that we're totally frightened about the future, but the future is lovely, dark, and deep. There's so many things. How do I know? How do I know it's the right thing? How am I gonna look back on my life and go, I made the right choices. I did the right stuff. How am I gonna know that? I need to know that in advance because I don't want to screw it up. How am I gonna not screw it up? Concerns, words. But every once in a while, it's not a bad thing to just kind of pause and to look in at the woods and the snow falling and to ask, am I done? Am I done? And the answer here is no. Why am I not done? I have promises to keep. Oh, I have had students that say, that's the key line of the poem. While the last line, miles to go before I sleep, is repeated, the I have promises to keep is the fundamental line of the poem. I'd like to stay here and just do nothing. Or enter the woods and never come out. That is to say, I'd like for this to all be done, but I have stuff to do. Why? Because I've made promises. Now obviously at 3B in a little bit we're going to have to ask this question. What are the promises that keep you going? What are the promises that could put you back on that pony and get you off because you got miles to go before you get any chance to rest? What are those promises that you've made, and to whom have you made them? Yourself? Other people? And do you plan to keep the promises that you've made? Let's jump to 2A really quickly. Obviously, major messages and themes, you could write down any number of them, right? The challenge of keep going, keep going. Possible message. Another message. Every once in a while, it's not a bad idea to stop by woods on a snowy evening. To recalibrate, to recalculate, to take inventory, to pause and to look. See, it's an interesting question. I like to ask it to juniors here in 24 months when you walk the track and the balloons go up and the mascara runs and you got your day of graduation and you're sitting there in your little plastic chair waiting to be handed your diploma, and 12 years of your life of education is come and gone, and 17, 18 years of your life, you're almost 20, that's halfway to 40, has come and gone. What will you be thinking about in that moment? What will you be thinking about? The crazy you're going to do later in the day after you graduate? Maybe. But the sun comes up the next day, just like every day. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? It's very possible that sitting in that moment, you become reflective the way you would stopping by woods on a snowy evening. And then it hits you. I got work to do. I got stuff to do. Why? Message number 3. I got promises that I've made that I got to keep. And I got a long ways to go, miles to go before I'm done, before I sleep. In other words, I don't have time to stand here and ponder and think. I got to get to work. Here in a bit we can jump to 3A. We're obviously going to have to ask about the to be or not to be soliloquy of Shakespeare's greatest play, Hamlet, where Hamlet will say it, to be or not to be. That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or take arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing him. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Ah, there's the rub. What dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coldness, give us pause. It is a normal thing in the craziness of life to find that you just want it to all finish, be done. We mentioned it in our last conversation with Birches. But notice the old man in Birches says, I'm not ready to go yet because I still want to have a chance at love. I want to stay alive for as long as I can because I want that chance at love. Here, it's I want to stay alive because I got promises. Let's jump to 2B really quickly. Clearly, and many of my students have said, this is one of the most fascinating poems where it just starts out as the most simple of poems and then it kind of translates and opens into this amazing metaphoric poem. I've had juniors who long after they graduate say, this is a poem I still remember. I can see that pony there shaking his head with the bells around his neck going, dude, what are we doing? And the speaker of the poem going, man, I'd like to just stay here and just go to sleep. But I can't. I can't. The attraction of just ending it all is there. But no, I can't. Why? Because I made promises. The symbolism is profound here, right? The rhythms are beautiful as well. Frost's command of the poetic. Can you understand his diction here? Obviously, we're studying genius as we look at a poem at a poet like this in a poem like this. At level 3, the relationships to other titles. Frost, and many readers of this poem have pointed out, Frost is clearly borrowing very heavily from ancient motifs. Right? We're thinking about, I already mentioned it, Shakespeare's Hamlet, standing on stage asking, do I commit the act of revenge on my stepdaddy uncle because he killed my father? Or do I just walk away? The soliloquy, of course, of to be or not to be, ending with, thus, conscience makes cowards of us all. We think. And once we start thinking, we stop acting. That distinction between thought and action. There are thinkers in the world and there are doers in the world. Which one are you? We talk about this in your senior year when we study Hamlet together. Of course, I've already mentioned it as well, maybe. Dante, he said he was lost in a dark wood at the beginning of Inferno. We're not speaking literally, we're speaking metaphorically. It will take the journey through hell and purgatory and paradiso for Dante to finally come full circle and figure out he has miles to go before he sleeps. In maybe the most precious passage of all of Inferno, Virgil will say to Dante, when Dante is so tired and he's ready to quit, he sits down and he says, I'm done. I don't want any more. I don't want any more. Walking through hell is a really hard thing for me. It's like walking through the Badlands for a whole day. Right? And Virgil says, up on your feet. This is no time to tire. The man who lies asleep will never wake in fame, and his desire will slip by him like a dream. Right? Back to the same notion again. What is for you your favorite up on your feet? I got miles to go before I sleep song in your whole playlist? What is the song you listen to when you are having the day of all days? Do you have a go-to song? Do you have a text you can listen to that all of a sudden says to you, hey, you made promises. You got to keep those promises. You got miles to go before you sleep. What is that one for you? What is that song? What is that movie? Some of us are motivated by videos. Is there a video? Right? I often said that one of the compelling videos of an earlier time was that REM video, Everyone Cries. Right? That notion that everybody's got garbage they go through. You're not special because you'd like to go hang out in the woods and do nothing. Every human feels that in the weight of the experience of this thing called living in this world. But you've made promises. Let's go to 3B. What are those promises? Wow. Now this is a compelling question. Let's ask it this way for your notes. What are the promises you have made that keep you going? That tell you, no, it's not over. You got miles to go before you sleep. You've got miles to go before you sleep. By the way, notice the way you can read those last two lines that way. The first line can be read as you got miles to go before you sleep. The last line, you've got emphasized miles to go before you sleep. It's always fun to ask, how old do you think the speaker in this poem is? Many read him as fairly young. Some read him as middle-aged. He's aware, for example, that somebody owns this farm, and they live back in a village, or so he thinks. And some people have loved to read this poem as, this is a really old man. Kind of like Eudora Welty's Warren